Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ginat, for another invitation to join you to share what I call Norio nonsense.
I would like to correct that, call it Norio knowledge.
Well,
Norio knowledge.
it's kind of a play on words. It's non and sense,
Got it.
so as opposed to, what do they call it? Common sense. Well, this is the opposite, not the opposite, but I call it nonsense because common sense is based on agreements, current agreements, and as I discovered, 90% of what we consider is real is not, and common sense is based on that. So I call it Norio nonsense. So anyway, so basically, what I like to share, what I like to share is what I consider what Jojo Sawa was really talking about. And what Jojo Sawa is really talking about is freedom. Freedom. And freedom is inherent in what we are as human beings. And so once we recognize what we are, what our form is, then we recognize that we're free. So my mother, I would say, was my number one teacher in life, and I consider George Osawa my second teacher. And I knew him till he died when I was 11 years old. But he would spend the summers with us, he and his wife Lima, and there are a number of things he said which I did not understand at all, but I just felt that there was a truth to it. There's a resonance, and one of the things he said is that we're responsible for everything in the world. And I did not, I couldn't understand what he meant by that until I was 50 years old. Another thing he stated was I forget what I'm talking about. He says that humans today don't know how to think. What we perceive as consider thinking is not thinking, and I didn't understand. Here again, I didn't understand what he's referring to, and now so and another thing he said is if we're healthy, we can eat anything. It's so these are the things that he would say that didn't make. I would ponder these questions as I was growing up. How am I responsible for everything in the world? So as I went through life, like whatever circumstances I found myself in, like as a teenager, like when I started dating and I split up with a girlfriend, I would look at how am I responsible for that, how that outcome was. So what I didn't recognize is that at the time because I was looking at that question, I would never blame someone else for my circumstance. Even though I didn't understand what Jojo Sawa meant, I felt like, well, okay, So if things didn't quote work out with a girlfriend, then it was like I didn't blame her for the outcome. So as a result, all my former girlfriends, ex-wives and stuff, I've always remained close with them because and I'm still close friends with the first girlfriend I had when I was a teenager, when I was 14, 15. So, and her family and her children and stuff. But so, and my mother would always, here and there, when I would say something, complain about something, she would remind me of that as well, in a gentle way, not in a harsh way at all. So,
Do you blame yourself, Norio, for anything?
well, in a sense, I would, it was, and what I've come to see really clearly is that when George Osao talked about that we're responsible for everything in the world, he's not talking about blame. As a matter of fact, when the real true meaning, I feel, of what responsibility means is freedom, is equal to freedom. But typically today, when we hear the word responsible, we hear it in terms of cause and effect, and someone's to blame. But what we don't recognize is that what I call the human dilemma is that we don't know what we are, and we don't know that we don't know. And so we're conditioned in such a way that we see the world in a particular way, but it's not. It's based on false assumptions and unconscious assumptions that there is a separate me here that is doing the action, and it turns out the me is just imagination. It's not an actuality, and yet we go through life assuming that there's this separate me. So in going through life as a separate me, the symptoms of that is that we feel vulnerable. We live and underlying our life is this fear, and we look at things, and the way we go through life is we look at, because of the unconscious fear, we're going through life attempting to control our circumstances. And it turns out that there isn't. So the illusion is that there is no controller. So the symptoms of living as from in the unconscious belief and that there is a separate me, then there's there's an unconscious fear in our existence. We look at life in terms of time, cause and effect, and which, as you were talking about, Ginat, responsibility, when I said responsibility, originally I thought of it, like you said, as blame. It's my fault or something, and we don't recognize that time itself is a creation in the way in which we're thinking. There actually is no time, but time is an interpretation of through our imagination. Anyway, and in going through life in this way, we're automatically judging, comparing, is one of the symptoms of not recognizing our true nature. You know, fundamentally, our true nature is infinite, and we're not in touch with that. So I know that it's like I said, it's Norio nonsense. I apologize. Nothing to apologize about, but I know I'm not making myself particularly specifically clear right now. But last month, Ginat had kindly invited me to be a presenter, and so we got some questions from that presentation, and I wanted to use this time here to look at those questions, like Dorothy. So there's a lot in Dorothy's questions to look at. So I think that's a good place to begin.
Okay. I will read Dorothy's letter, hopefully. Just a moment. Or not. Wait a minute. Here it is. Okay. So let's see if I can move it over. Hi, Ginat. Hold on here. Okay. I'm on your email list for the lectures, and I just finished watching Norio Kushi's April 2nd lecture, and it was so great and so insightful. I have a question for you about it. I loved what I heard, but I was also hoping to hear his thoughts about why he thinks he developed cancer and why he thinks Misho and Aveline and his sister did too. It's mentioned in the written synopsis about his lecture that he openly shares why he thinks he developed cancer, particularly in light of his parents' promotion of macrobiotics as cancer preventative and their deaths and that of his older sister from cancer. But I didn't hear him talk about that. To your knowledge, does he talk about that anywhere else? I'd be so interested to hear his thoughts about it. I believe in the healthfulness of the macrobiotic diet and lifestyle and of a whole food plant-based diet in general. And I figure that Misho and Aveline, in a very heroic sense, gave themselves so selflessly to spreading the word and helping people that they sacrificed their own health in the course of that hectically busy and exhausting traveling lifestyle in order to facilitate those things. I read what Misho had to say about their cancers in the revised edition of the Cancer Prevention Diet, and maybe also in a taped lecture somewhere as well. But I'm so curious to hear Norio's thoughts on it too. If you're not aware of the tape, that's enough. Okay, very good. So let me.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Shall we start with the first paragraph?
Okay.
The way in which I interpret life is that there's only one cause to death. There's only one cause of death, and the only cause of death is birth. So everything else is anything else is just an interpretation of that. Oh, I died because I got hit by a car. I died because I got cancer. I died because of whatever. In fact, the only cause of death is birth.
Is what?
Is birth. Birth.
Breath.
So,
breathing.
No, birth. Being born.
Birth. Okay.
Being born. That's the only cause of death. And back in 2005, 4, I began asking the question as I was driving the truck, what does it mean to be human? And in asking that question, insights started coming in as I'm driving. And one of the insights that I saw is that one of the insights that came to me is that time is created in the way in which we're thinking. And it's not an actuality. So in the recognition of that, I saw that birth and death is a single event. It's like an arrow in flight. So if you imagine an arrow being shot from a bow, and the arrow is flying, and then the arrow hits the target. So birth is when the arrow leaves the bow, and the arrow is our human identity, our human form, and death is when it hits the target. So if we were the arrow, if the arrow were being human, it would be talking, complaining, saying, I should have done this, I should have, etc. Or I shouldn't have gotten this, I shouldn't have gotten cancer or whatever, etc. And then it hits the bullseye, and the arrow, and it always hits the target and always hits the bullseye. So regardless of how the life looks, it was lived perfectly. There was no mistakes, so this was a recognition. And then ultimately, by 2000, I recognized that even birth and death is an illusion. So so I saw that when we die, we actually don't go anywhere. There actually is no such thing as death. But that's another whole nother subject. So so this was in 2005 now, and then a number of years later, as we're speaking in terms of time, which is a human agreement, it's not an actuality, but we play, this is the way we play, we speak this way. Then in August 2021, I was diagnosed with something called Merkel cell carcinoma. There's this lump growing off my leg, and I called it Mr. Bump. So there's Mr. Bump had come into my life, and it's growing on my leg. So I got it diagnosed, and it was diagnosed as cancer. So it never occurred to me that it shouldn't be there, or there's something wrong, or with it. At the same time, I recognize, it has altered it has not altered the flight of the arrow. It has not altered, because the flight, I don't know what the flight of the arrow is necessarily going to look like. All I know is this is what's up now. And I don't see it as bad or wrong, or it shouldn't be. It's just this. That's all, regardless what I think. And so in retrospect, my sister and my mother, they had, quote, died from cancer. And so in 2005, I saw that was just an interpretation, that's not the actuality. And recognizing that there's actually, even the idea of birth and death is a concept. That the only thing that dies is the self-identity, because the self-identity only exists when there's the human physical form. But once the human physical form goes back to whatever, dissolves, goes back to the earth or whatever, then the self-identity dies with that, but the consciousness and the energy of what we truly are is not a thing. It can't be identified. It can't be languaged. It is what's energetically languaging. Then that does not exist that exists beyond the actual physical form. And so the grief that I still held regarding my mother and my sister's death completely vanished. And likewise, so the circumstance around Mr. Bump is no longer Mr. Bump. I call it Mr. Crater because I had it irradiated and the bump was dissolved, and now there's this crater where the Mr. Bump used to be. So I call it Mr. Crater, and yeah, it's been painful. It's been an interesting contrast to how my life has been, because my life has been really pain-free, virtually pain-free. I was 8 years old the first time I hurt myself when I hurt my knee. Let's see, I mean, I remember all the times I had pain. Like I never had a headache in my life. Last stomachache I had was in August 1973. So I've lived virtually a pain-free life. And so now with the affections of Mr. Crater, I now experience this pain. And it doesn't occur to me that I shouldn't be there. There's something wrong with it. It's, I have a bandage on my leg. My son helps change my bandage. And, I could be in extreme pain and my son, it's been a wonderful opportunity to really get to know my children a lot more because I'm not busy out driving. And he'll crack a joke and I'll be in excruciating pain, but then I'll be laughing so hard at the same time because of his joke, with tears coming out of my eyes because of the joke and stuff, things like that. In other words, I see this all as a appreciation of life. It is not diminished at all. And so that's so that's the now at the same time, that doesn't mean I'm not going for immunotherapy. I'm not, like, I changed my diet, started eating how I ate when I was raised, etc. And yeah, it's all in continuing an adventure. And who knows what's going to happen? I don't know. But I welcome anything. It's all very welcome. So that was the first question, our first paragraph that Dorothy stated. The second one was regarding my parents' work. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's we as human forms, like the way in which we go through life, we question oftentimes what is our purpose, or what is the meaning of our existence? What is the meaning? When we understand when we see our true nature, which is at our core, we're all infinite, then we see that what our purpose is. Our purpose is to play. And our purpose, and in the playing, what we're doing is we're recreating the infinite. So our purpose is to recreate the infinite, and by playing. So what does the play look like? Well, every single one of us, like every snowflake is different. Every one of us, the way in which we play is going to be different. So what I see is that in the recreating the infinite, in playing, the way we play is with each other. It's like we are dancing with each other in nature and our environment. And so life is dancing. We're dancers as we go through life, and we nurture each other's way of dancing, and ultimately, when we live a full life, we flower. And so in our dancing, in the purpose, as we go through life, we're here to support each other in flowering and nurturing each other, and in every interaction as we interact and play and with each other. We're here to support each other in our flowering. So, and however, well, the way in which we've been conditioned from as a toddler, in the way that we speak in once we begin to speak, is we learn that we're separate beings. We learn to live in, as we get older, as a teenager, we learn we have to have a purpose and meaning. We have to make something out of our life. So we grow up, because we grow up identifying with an imaginary me, like Santa Claus, I'm Santa Claus, whatever, it's an image, which is, we lose touch with our foundation, infinite foundation, and we feel there's something missing. We go through life as though there's something missing, when in actuality, there's never anything missing, but we don't know, we're not in touch with that. So in going through life in that way, we're looking for feeling whole. We're looking to feel at home in our body and in the world. And so subsequently, the way in which we're playing is we're playing from this place of lack, where there's something missing. And we're looking for answers from others. So my parents' work they're playing based on current reality of, they're playing to nurture and other people's flowering, etc. But unknowingly, they did they like all of you are living perfectly. And we get to play teacher, we get to play student, we get to play, we get to play that there's something missing. When in fact there never is. And it's it's so we get to play judging cancer as bad. We shouldn't have cancer. So, I mean, the whole idea, and cancer is a label, and the idea that we have something is there's nothing here that has anything. Ownership is just ownership for having something is part of the game, but it's not. The person who has something is part of the is the infinite, which isn't missing or anything. So I don't know if I made myself clear at all, but I appreciate everyone listening to the nonsense.
So
Did you want to read more, or did you want to add anything, Tina?
I just wondered, for you personally, does fear creep in?
Fear?
Worry,
Well,
anxiety?
repeat your question again, Tina.
Yes. In your personal experience, do you experience fear or anxiety?
Not anymore. Not since 2005. What I saw in 2005 in February, what I call being hit with a cosmic 2x4, is in the question of what does it mean to be human. All these insights started coming in, and so like the insight of time not being real, it's one of them. But there are many insights. Finally, so in February, I saw what thinking is, and we don't know. And I realized then that's what I understood what Jojo Sawa meant. That we don't know what thinking is, and we don't think. Humans don't. He says we aren't thinking. So what? So the night that I saw what thinking is, I saw that, for example, the belief in God and not believing in God is one and the same thing. They're not opposites. It's the same thing. It's identical. And so subsequently, in that recognition, that's where duality exists, is in thinking, in the way in which we're thinking. This is, I believe in God, I don't believe in God. Or this is good, this is bad. Those are just ideas which are contained in thinking. So subsequently, in the next morning, I woke up in my truck. After I saw that, and I laughed, and then I went to sleep. Next morning, I wake up. Next thing as I start my day, I see that thinking is not. I'm not. The thinking is just happening. I'm not thinking. The thinking is like out in the clouds. It's like, when I look at the clouds, when we look at the clouds, we don't say, that's my cloud. Well, in the same way, I could see the thinking is not mine. It's just happening. And so as I'm going through the day, watching the thinking just happening, it's like waves coming and going. There was a recognition that there's spaces between each wave of thought. And as the attention was put on the spaces, then the thinking stopped. The space expanded. And so for 2 weeks, there was no thinking. And the fascinating thing with that is that I could still drive my truck.
Hmm.
There was still a presence. There was still a seeing, and the first shock was that I thought I needed my thinking to drive. But I realized, no, I could drive. The thinking actually interfered with my driving. And so after 4 days of no thinking, then I saw that everything that we go through life identifying with a separate me, that is only in thinking. That only exists in thinking. It's an imagination. And so in the recognition of that, what I call being hit by the cosmic 2x4, that I don't exist, that I was an imagination, only in language and thinking, then over the next 10 days, the insights as to what the true nature of our being is just started coming in. And I created a map, a human map, of what to describe what was recognized. So
Dorothy also asks, is there an understanding, is it important, why cancer, why that kind, why that place, why not something else? Is there a meaning to that?
well, what I tell my kids, like when all my children have ridden with me in the truck at one time when they would ask me whenever they would ask me a why question, I would tell them because the grass is green and the sky is blue. Anytime they ask me a why question, why is it? Because the grass is green and the sky is blue. So what I was implying to them is that a why questions infers cause and effect, and there is no cause and effect. We make up reasons for what is arising is arising, and then out of fear we want to control what is arising, and so we try to figure out what caused this, especially if it's something which is considered negative, like cancer is held as, I would guess that most people consider it negative. So whatever is arising, so when Mr. Bump shows up, it's not looked at as negative. And so I'm not looking at, I'm not looking at it like cause. Why did I get this? Because I don't consider it something that I've gotten. It's just what's shown up. And the gift of that is that, well, I had to stop driving a truck, and I explore what the next step is. Okay, it's play with my diet, play with going to the doctor, their irradiation, going through immunotherapy, play with meditation, try meditation, Joe Dispenza, whatever, I've read a lot of books now about Mr. Bump, about cancer and things. So that's just it's not, it's part of, I look at it as part of the play. And it
So
is,
have
that
a-
is, yeah.
You have a desire to continue physical life.
Well, I don't need to have that desire. The infinite takes care of that.
You're making efforts to continue.
Well, it's inherent. The way the infinite plays is to create forms and to perpetuate the form. You know, so inherent in our design is the instinct to survive, or survive. Right? So that's built into the form in the way we play. So, like you say, there's this desire to continue, and so that's inherent in the form. So I don't need to stress about that. It's just so that the desire to continue in this form, the desire for this form to continue. So there isn't a me that's desiring it. It's, if you understand what I'm saying, it's like it's taken care of. So in that design, there's a reading, looking at different things about cancer, different, So it's all. Do you understand what I'm saying, Gina?
Sure.
So it's not. So it's not that I'm reading those things because I have a desire to live. The desire for living is in its expression, in its natural expression, in the same way we desire to breathe, desire to eat.
Mhm.
So whatever's showing up, if it's cold, we get desire to get warm. So the desire for life is the same. It's the dance. And so in the dance, I'm now looking at, okay, what's up? It's try to, yeah. So yes, I think you understand what I'm saying, Dina.
Invite anyone who would like to ask questions, and Norio, welcome. Do we have questions? And Norio, did you want to say any more?
Well, I could talk nonsense all day long. I would love to hear from other people.
I don't know if I have an intelligent question. Hello. What do you, how do you proceed with the visits of the doctors where you go? You have this classical treatment, and do you never ask questions with a V, with a W? Because of, yeah, it's a different thinking. You just, how do you manage to be in contact with medicine?
Yeah, that's yeah, I mean, definitely I ask questions of the doctors, and they so as I enter the system, talk, which is very interesting. I never knew how the Western medical system worked, because I was never sick. So until I was graced with Mr. Bump. So so they diagnosed me with this particular type of cancer, and then they recommended certain protocols, and I, so yes, so I considered it. And I also would talk to another doctor about it, and I would talk to friends who had the treatments that the doctor recommended and see what they said about it. So the questions of why never occurred. I could come now, if you ask me why, then I could say, well, I think it's because of the way I ate, for example. Or I think it's because, but ultimately what was recognized is there's no longer an idea or desire to control my life, control my destiny. That, however, as I shared with Ginat's question, the desire for the existence of this form is inherent in the form. So that's still there. So following that natural desire, the question of why doesn't need to be there.
Mhm.
And so the desire just is looking at, oh, what is the next step? Like, for example, what I realized, because actually it was in 2002, September 2002, I realized that life is not going to turn out. I realized that everything that I was chasing success. I wanted to have $50 million in my account, in my bank account, for example. And, because I figured, well, if we divide all the money in the world up equally amongst all humans, then I would have at least $50 million. With inflation, it's probably now, $50 million. But back in 2002, it was more like $15 million. So I thought, well, that's a good goal. I just want my fair share. But anyway, so there, and I had image of what kind of house I want, a modest home, but comfortable. I wanted a nice barn where I could fit a truck and a couple of really nice cars and things, so I had all these images of the future. So, and in 2002, it hit me that none of that was going to happen. In other words, life is not going to turn out in this. I saw it was all imagination, and so I stopped living for a future. And once I stopped living for a future, what occurred is that I've never had to make a decision since that moment that I stopped living for a future. We don't recognize that having to make decisions is a symptom of living for an imaginary future. All of future is imagination. So subsequently, as I went to the doctor and introduced Mr. Bump to the doctor, then I get more information. These doctors quote, studied all these things. They're supposedly experts in it. So in the same way, I like to play, I like wheels. I could teach you how to drive a truck if you want to drive a truck. And I can say I'm an expert in that. Not just that, I love anything with wheels. So I can tell you all about all kinds of things. Anyway, so the doctor has studied Mr. Bumps of different flavors and different colors and stuff. So I listened to them and I said, okay, I'll give it a try, So, but at the same time, I'm interested. I read and look up and talk to friends who have had these kinds of treatments and stuff, and then I tell the doctor, okay, I'll go ahead with it. So, but the why question doesn't occur. And the doctor asked my girlfriend, is he always so calm?
The doctor is calm.
Because I'm just totally relaxed. I mean,
because you don't provoke him in asking questions. You just are there and you accept.
I ask questions. I do ask questions.
Mhm.
But not the why questions don't occur for me. The need for control.
Very interesting. This is like a dichotomy. It's like a dualism that you pursue, because on one side you let it go, you let it just go, and then the doctor's path is a different path. It's not being confident everything is all right. This cannot be changed. You give it a trial. You give this actual knowledge of the time. You give it a try. I think for us to observe it and to hear you it's very valuable. It's very precious that you go this path, because it's what most people do. With the consciousness that you bring along, you go this path. I'm very, very curious how this continues, and I wish you, Norio, that you have the life that
thank you
for you, what it means.
Thank you. And I wanted to say a little bit more about fear. That fear, if there is no thinking, there is no fear. Fear is when we're concerned about when there's there's a threat to one's existence, the continuation of the form, then there's a natural desire to want, instinctive desire to want to live and survive. So we could call that fight or flight. The instinctive reaction. That's not fear. Fear is when the talking to oneself, the thinking, is talking in terms of an imaginary future to itself. And most of what we are, when fear shows up, I would say 90% of the time, there is actually no threat to the form. It's an imagined threat. So when there's an actual threat, even to the form, like, for example, I was held up at gunpoint one time. And here I am looking down the barrel of a gun, and And I thought, okay, this is the, my life is over. This is it. I felt no fear at all. I accepted that this was the end, that the arrow hit the bullseye, although I didn't have that analogy at the time. 19 at the time. And so just prior to the robbery occurring, I knew it was going to happen. I just could see it. And the moment I saw that it was going to happen, the thinking stopped, the talking to itself. And I became highly alert. And with no thinking. Then the robbery occurred, and once I became highly alert, it was at night. All of a sudden I could see all the trees and everything. Even though it was dark, I could see all this light coming off the trees and the plants, and it lit up the darkness. And then the minute later, whatever, the robbery occurred, and I just thought, okay, this is the end. And then, but they took my money and then they left. So during all of that, there was absolutely no fear because there was no talking to oneself. So there is what I recognize is that we think that there's something out there that causes fear. Oh, a virus is out to get us, COVID-19, whatever. And we become fearful of it. But no, nothing out there causes fear. The fear is already present within ourselves. And what's out there is interpreted in such a way in the talking to itself that the fear comes to the surface. And the fear that's within us is based on the idea that there's this vulnerable me, which is also just an idea. So when the thinking stops, that me identity ends because it only exists in thinking. And so there's no fear when there's no thinking. Oh,
Norio,
yes, Kinat.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
So this is the freedom which Shorya was speaking of.
This is freedom, this is love.
And yeah, absolutely. Everything is an expression of the infinite. And ultimately, everything that is being expressed is unconditional love. Ultimately, that's all there is unconditional love. And through the way in which we play, and then mistakenly identify this me character as which then is limited in time space, caught in time space. Then the way in which we're expressing this energy, this unconditional love, is then expressed as sorrow, anger, etc. Well, ultimately, so that's just kind of but ultimately, really, that's all there is unconditional love.
Love is all there is.
Yeah.
Norio, words don't even begin. Thank you so much. Thank you, Norio.
Yeah, and birth and death is part of the game. When we die, we don't go anywhere because there's nowhere to go.
Bye now.